this was later on because we were in the camp, 15,000 children.
Hitler wanted to kill all the Jews in Europe. Not many people believed he would really do this, so no one stopped him. He rounded them all up and loaded them onto trains and locked them in horrible places called concentration camps. There was no way anyone could escape. The life they used to have was gone.
We had a wonderful life in Czechoslovakia. I come from a family of 8 children. 6 girls and 2 boys. My father was very Orthodox. Our whole family was Orthodox. We lived in a small town of maybe 1,500 to 1,800 people. The Jewish community was, I would say, maybe 35–40%. We had 1 synagogue, we had a cheder, and we went to public school. And we had wonderful neighbors as friends. We always kind of stuck to our Jewish friends and our Jewish families. We had a lot of simchas till the war broke out, okay? In 1938, everything changed. The Hungarians took over. They marched into our town. My father was a tailor, and when the Hungarians marched in, all the Jewish businesses were confiscated, and they were given to non-Jewish people. So it was kind of hard for him because he had to support a family of 10. And so, but they did let him bring home 1 machine. Even though he didn't do much of the tailoring, he had like 6 or 8 people working for him. But when this happened, he had to start working to make enough money to feed us. And this was going on for quite some time, 1938 till 1944. But actually, for about 2 or 3 years before, like in 1941 and 42, I'm not exactly sure of the dates, my father, they used to come and take all the men in my town, all the Jewish capable men, and they would take him to work on roads and factories, like slave labor. They would take him on Mondays, and they would come back on Friday. They would come back, I remember my father used to come back so dirty, the clothes were filthy. So this was going on till of April 1944. And we always thought, we were under the impression that we were going to be left home because this was so close to the end of the war almost. We never expected this to happen to us, that the Germans would give an order for the people who were in charge in our town, which is the regular police over there, to do what they did. They rounded up all the Jews. A day after Pesach, there was an announcement made. All the Jews have to meet in the high school. They were going to be transported to the next town. And they said, take what you can, take some food, clothing. And I remember my mother saying, put on a couple of dresses and a couple of sets of underwears and socks because we don't know how long we're going to be gone. Maybe we won't have a chance to clean anything. So we did, and then they put us on an oxen-driven wagon or a carriage, I'm not sure what it's called, and we went to the next town about 20 kilometers away, and there they put us on an area where there was a train station. It was like a brick factory. They would transport bricks all over Europe from there. And the reason they put us there is because we were right on the train station. They transported us to Auschwitz from there. We stayed there many weeks, I don't know how long, because I don't remember it so many years ago. And the day came when our names came up and they said, well, you've got to go on the train tomorrow or whatever. And we were put on a cattle car and taken to Auschwitz. This cattle car had no bathrooms, no water, no toilets or anything. They squeezed us in like herring, and there were no seats, so some of us were standing, some of us were sitting. We were in the train for I don't know how long, but of course people couldn't go to relieve themselves, so it was kind of bad smell in the train. Some people passed out. I don't know how many, because there were all kinds of people, young, old, middle-aged, you know. And we were in this train maybe a day or maybe a day and a half, I don't know how long. But anyway, we arrived to Auschwitz. The door opened of the train, and a man in a striped uniform came up to me, and he said to me, how old are you? I said, I am 14. He says, tell them you're 18. I had no idea what he was talking about. And then he goes over to my sister Helen, and he said to her, is this your child? He was holding my sister's hand. No, this is my sister. So that was that. And he went around to different young girls, telling them to tell their age, that they're older. When we got out of the train, they marched us 5 in a row, and we came in front of 3 SS soldiers, and I believe one of them was Mengele. My father and my brother was pointed, go this way. My mother and 4 sisters and brothers this way, a different line. And to my 2 sisters, he says, go here. And he came to me and he said, how old are you? I said, I'm 18. And my sister Helen says, no, she's only 14. I said, no, I am 18. I was very strict with him. I am 18. He let me go with my 2 sisters. Otherwise, I would have gone to the gas chambers with my mother and 4 sisters and brothers.
I was born in Germany, and my parents were Polish. And before the war, I was about 9 years old, and I'll zoom right up to 1938. I was 9 years old, going to public school, somewhere around 4th grade. And as I was attending school in the classroom, 2 SS men came in civilian uniform, took me by the arm and said, you got to come with me. It was 1 year before the war. And they escorted me to the city jail. We lived in a large city in Cottbus. And they said, you're going to wait here for your parents. I said, well, what are we doing here? They said, you're going to sit here and wait for the parents. That jail was full of people straight from their factories, from their kitchens, the women with their aprons on, workers with their overalls on, let's say office people with their attaché case. And what was going on, that Hitler made an edict on that particular day to exile all the Polish citizens. He didn't get the Peace of Danzig. He asked for the corridor of Danzig, access to the Black Sea. He didn't get it. So he took all the Polish citizens and exiled them on that one day. We was waiting in that jail for the trains. And while this was going on, my parents, they came to my parents, trying to escort them to the jail. And they said, they're not going till I come home. And he says, okay, we'll give you half an hour. And they packed up 3 suitcases with all kinds of clothing and knickknacks and some other semi-valuable stuff. And they gave him the half an hour, and then they brought him into that jail. And we were reunited in the jail. There was 3 kids and my parents. My brother was 1 year older, and my sister 1 year younger. When they pushed us on the train, this was a real, still a civilian, regular carriage type train. They locked the doors, and there were SS secret type police at every door, and they went through the wagons or through the railroad cars and took away all the people's money, and they left a small amount. I wouldn't know what it was that they left. And the train was pushed into Poland. They uncoupled the engines, pulled them back into Germany. They left the carriages and with the people sitting just on the border or across the border. and all mayhem broke out. Okay, my parents speaking Polish. We had family in Poland, grandparents from both sides, and uncles and all kinds of people. And they tried to get out and try to buy a ticket to go forward and onward. And they told us to stay in the carriage and wait for them. And the train somehow shuttled a little bit forward and backwards, and we were scared to death. We took the suitcases, threw them out the window. We climbed out the windows, and we went on the platform waiting for them. And they finally, we were reunited back again. They somehow finagled a ticket to Poznań, which is another border city in Poland. And we were able to make our way to Poznań. And in Poznań, the Jewish committees were receiving us and tried to kept us for a day or two until we figured out what else, where we can go forward from there. All right, so we're in Poland, and we're making our way into deeper Poland, trying to get to my grandpa from my father's side, okay? And we finally made it in there, a little town called Brzesko, and we come into his town. He was already a widower, a rather old man, and the house was dilapidated, simple, and not able to accommodate a family of 5. And it didn't work. We stayed there a day or two, and then we went onward via carriage or droshka to my grandma's, from my grandma's side, from my mother's side, into Poland, where they had a farm, they had acreage, and they had a large house, and into that house, it was somewhere in the backwoods, small little village, 5 families congregated, waiting the war and hoping to wait out the war. And this was all still a year before the war. We knew the war was imminent. And the Polish people had what they call Volksdeutsche. Many of the Poles had the Nazi uniforms in their closets. Volksdeutsche. They belonged to like we have undergrounds over here, there was underground movement. And when the war broke out, they put the uniforms on, and they already had a double army taking the country. The Poles from one side, the Germans from one side, and the Volksdeutsche from the other side. So Poland was lost or taken by the Germans within days, 2-3 days, and except for Warsaw, where the big fights were going on. Now we stayed in this grandma's house, like I said, with 5 different families. Each family had 1 room. We were 5 in the room. And we worked the fields and we worked the farm. And when the Germans with their military came through the village, and we would find out their transports and their trucks, and they also had horses in those days still. We would go up into the woods and hide for the day or for the night until they disappear and go somewhere else. And then we came back. And this was going on until 1942. In 1942, they put out an edict that all Jews have to deliver themselves to a ghetto, and they designated the ghetto, which Zaklichin, and my father said, that's not for us, we'll try to do something different. And he found out that a working camp is being established in the next village from where we were, staying. And he went there with certain knickknacks that we had in the suitcases. These suitcases were used for bartering for food and other things in the last 3 years. And there were some knickknacks in there that were desk appointments in marbleized blotters and letter openers and inkwells and stuff like that. And he went to that commandant of that camp, and he says, "Take us in." Trying to give him this, "Take us in." And he finagled this way, of course, speaking well good German. he was able to finagle the entire family went into that first working camp, all 5 of us. And that didn't last too long in that camp, but that was a start, and we didn't need to deliver ourselves to a ghetto, and God knows what would happen right away. So from that working camp, we went onwards by trucks and lorries to the next working camp, which was called Mielec, and that was a big aircraft factory. And they separated the women. They probably had 30,000 inmates there. Women were separated. That's it. My mother went over there, and with my sister, my brother, and my father and myself stayed together. They tattooed us. I have a KL, which stands Konzentrationslager, which is very rare. Only people in Mielec were given that. And we worked there for quite a while. They used us, kids. I was 13, I was 13 years old, with smaller hands, and we held those metal things for the rivets. So while they were riveting, we would hold to buffer the rivets so the rivets would split into narrower places, and worked in a camp for a year and a half, and then went on and on and on to other camps.
We arrived to Auschwitz, as I said, and here we are in Auschwitz, and we are 5 in a row. After they let me go with my 2 sisters, older sisters, and they marched us to the bathroom, okay? It was a big room, maybe the size of the room where we were in just this morning. There must have been hundreds of women, all women. The first thing they said, take all your clothes off. We took all our clothes off and put it up on a stack. Everybody took it off, and then they shaved all our hair everywhere. Then, after that was done, there were a couple of German soldiers in the corner taking pictures of all this, of all our naked ladies over there. And I couldn't recognize my 2 sisters because they were all naked and shaven. We all had long black hair and, never seen them naked. When you're that age, you're vain. You don't let anybody see your body. So finally, I called out to my sisters, and I found them. And then they told us there were some ugly clothes, horrible clothes in another place, and they told us to find a dress. They didn't even give us our shoes back, and wooden shoes. And after this was done, they told us to go outside, line up again 5 in a row. And it was getting dark, and as we were standing there waiting, behind the bathroom there was a big fire, and there was all kinds of noise coming from back of that bathroom. You could hear children calling their mothers, mothers calling their children, and you could almost see like shadows in the smoke and in the fire, like walking around like they were half dead. You know what I mean? I remember that scene so well. I could probably do a picture about that. And there was a German soldier standing next to my sister Judy. He had a dog with him, and my sister just said, "What is that noise behind the building and that fire?" And he said, "They're burning hair." So my sister said, "Well, hair doesn't make this kind of noise." Then he said, "They're burning cripples." So we found out later what they were doing. They didn't even give the people enough gas to kill them. They would shove them outside through the back. They would shove them outside, and some of them are still alive while they were burning them. And then we knew what happened to my mother and 4 sisters and brothers. Then we knew what happened. So anyway, after that, they marched us to our barrack, which was in Birkenau, Auschwitz, Lager C. And they put us in Block 26. There were 30 barracks in Seelager, which is this camp. 1,000 women in each barrack. And we had 3 rows of bunks. And there were, as I said, 30,000 women. One barrack was a bathroom and one barrack was a kitchen. And we get up, we go to bed. We had no mattresses, no covers, no nothing. This was, I think, in either April or May, I'm not sure. It was very cold, so we were like 8 women in one bed, so we kept each other warm. And in the morning we get up, and I said to my sisters, I'm going to get up. I want to see what's going on. And my sisters didn't, they stayed, and I walked out, and I'm walking, and somebody's calling out my name, Rosie. My Jewish name is Rosie. And I look, and I said, who is this? He says, don't you recognize me? I'm your father. Temporarily, they put some men in this camp till they ship them out on they're going to be shipped to factories to work. Because so many people were coming in. You know, within 6 weeks or so, they brought 500,000 Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. Okay? So anyway, so when he says, I'm your father, and we hugged and we talked, and first thing he said to me, where is your mother? I said, I don't know. And then he asked me if my sisters are with me. I said, yes, Judy and Helen was with me. And he says, Fishy is with me. My brother was with my father. He was like 17 or 18. And we talked, and he said, stay together, because when you're together, you have a much better chance of survival. And then also he said, stay alive so you can tell the world what they're doing to us. So we said goodbye, and we made up to meet again the next morning. My father said, I don't know how long they're going to keep us here, probably a couple of days, but let's meet again tomorrow. Bring your Judy and Helen with you, and we'll talk again. And the next morning we did meet again, and he repeated the same thing. Stay alive so you can tell the world what they're doing to us. And we said goodbye. My brother he came, and my father, and then we made up to meet again the next morning, but the next morning they were not there no more. They shipped them out. So we are in Auschwitz and Birkenau, in this horrible, horrible place where you can smell the chimney. The stench was so strong from the burning of the bodies, really terrible. So we are in Zaylager, and they're doing selections, and they're counting us every day. Rain or shine, they're counting us. In the meantime, people are getting sick. All these people that came in from Hungary, and these people were not strong enough to take stuff like this, you know, to endure such hardship. They would give us a cup of coffee in the morning, slice of bread lunchtime, and soup in the evening. The coffee was bitter coffee, and they would give it to us in like a 6 or 8 quart pot, and you take a sip, and that was your breakfast. And I took a sip of that coffee, and I thought I was going to throw up, because I never had this in my home. In my home, when we had coffee, we had a little bit of coffee and a lot of milk. That's how we drank coffee at home. The lunch was a slice of bread, and dinner, they gave you soup, also from a pot, a big pot. We had no canteens, no spoons, no nothing. We took a sip from the pot. If you're lucky, you had 2 sips, because this was supposed to be for 8 people. And if you're lucky to get that if there was a potato on top, you could get a potato, that would have been a miracle. And the soup was so horrible. It was like rice and cabbage and full of sand, full of dirt. And a lot of us got very sick. I got so sick, after being there 3 days, I had diarrhea for 6 weeks. Okay? And I couldn't eat the stuff, and I was losing weight like crazy. And when they were counting us every day, and when they were counting us, I couldn't stand up. My 2 sisters had to hold me up so I shouldn't fall. And they would pinch my cheek so I should have some color in my face. So anyway, so this goes on for quite a while. And then we had selections all the time to go to factories for slave labor. And every time they had selections, we would go for the selections, and they would always put me in the line to take me to the gas chambers, because I was very skinny, and they would make us undress sometime to see if we have strong bodies to take us to work to factories. So after several times me being selected to go to the gas chambers, I told my sisters, I'm not going to go through the selections anymore. I will just stay out of it, because when they need 200 women or 300 women, and there's 1,000 women in a barrack, you don't have to go if you don't want to go. So, and I knew I wouldn't be selected. So my sisters, when they were selected to go to work, they would not go. They would just stay behind. And we did this for about 3 or 4 months in Auschwitz, because I was never strong enough to get into a transport to take. They should take me to work. Finally, this is already October, September or October. Of course, we had no calendars or anything. We had nothing. And by the way, the conditions were so horrible. In 3 months, we didn't have a change of clothes. We had no soap. We had cold water and holes in the ground to relieve yourself. So all of us were full of lice. A lot of us still have marks on our bodies from the bites of the lice. And if you wanted to wash your dress, you could go to the bathroom. There was cold water in the sink. You could take your dress off, wash it, and then wait for it to dry and then put it back on. And we were kind of lucky in a way, because we were there in the summer. If we would have been in the winter, we would have died like ants, because it was so cold. All we had is a dress. No coats, no jackets, no nothing. I don't know how people survived in the winter over there. So anyway, finally there is a rumor that they need 300 women for this factory in the Sudetenland, where they were making uniforms, guns, and masks. And I said to my 2 sisters, Helen and Judy, I said, you go and get selected. I will see how I can steal myself into this transport. Because this was getting so late, the barracks were getting empty. People were leaving. They were not bringing new people in anymore. And so as they were going through the line to be selected, I said, hold the place for me in line. And there was a door in the back, and somebody was guarding the door. Nobody could leave through the back, just through the front. But I saw one of the women go to the back, who was in charge of the food, that used to give us food and other things. Like she was like a master, or a Stubenälteste, what do they call that in English?
Couple.
Like a Jewish couple, okay? So and she goes to the back, and this woman who's guarding the door lets her out. I said, my God, this is my chance to get out. I ran out, and I ran to the back, and this lady guarding us says, where are you going? I said, that's my mother, I want to go with her. I said, the lady you just let out, she's my mother, let me go with her. She let me out. I ran to the front of the barrack, and my sisters held a place for me in line. That's how I got out of Auschwitz. So when we did this, they took us to the bathroom. And I said, my God, if I have to get undressed naked, they're going to put me in the gas chambers. Because you never know. So they took all our clothes, they shaved our hair again, gave us clean clothes, and they put us on trucks, and they sent us to Bruntal, which is in the Sudeten someplace. And I worked on, and also it was a camp with electric wires all around us. And I also want to mention that in Auschwitz, in Birkenau, we had electric wires all around us, and people died daily because they couldn't take it anymore. They would just go, put their hands on the electric wires, and they would be dead in 20 seconds. And every day they would pick up the dead bodies. There were special people who used to do that. So in this new camp, it was called Bruntal. We were 300 women. We were all each assigned to different. I was assigned to a mask. I was checking masks. I don't know what it was, but I had to sit on a high stool to look into it, and I don't know what I did, but I did. And the factory, actually, there were German women sitting next to me, and sometimes they would bring an apple for me. You know, they were kind, trying to be kind to us. They knew who we were. And one day I said to the lady in charge, you know, this is very hard work. I have to climb on the chair, off the chair, look in here, look in there. I said, I should get an extra meal. And good enough, she says, you can have 2 lunches every day. So I used to get an extra lunch, and I would take it back to the house where we were living, the house where we were staying. I would share it with my 2 sisters. So it wasn't bad. It was like great. Compared to Auschwitz, it was like heaven, okay? Because we got 3 meals. We got showered once a week. We got clean clothes. They needed our labor, so they treated us like human beings. So we are there, and of course they're scaring us all the time, saying if we don't do the work right, they're going to send us back to Auschwitz. And also they counted us every day. And this was going on till May 6th. May 6th, comes May 6th, there's a sign someplace on the wall that they're going to take us out for a march. So, okay, they told us to be ready to go. So we were ready. May 6th, May 7th, May 8th, we get up. The gates are open. The Germans all ran away. They didn't have enough time to get us together to take us on a march because the Russians were so close. So May 8th, we get up and I hear all this noise, Russian speaking, and I hear guns and I hear shooting and all kinds of things. And I said to my sisters, I'm going to go out and see what's going on. I found a stick and I put a rag on the stick and I ran into it was a big land where they were growing all kinds of corn and stuff, okay? And I ran with the stick and there were the Russians and they liberated us. So that was my happiest day of my life. I couldn't believe it. So here we are, they liberated us, and then we stayed there a couple of weeks because some of the girls ate too much food. Their stomachs were not used to eating too much food and they got sick. So we stayed a couple of weeks and then we said, well, we have to start going home. So we went to the train station, but the trains all over Europe were so full you wouldn't believe it. All the survivors are all over Europe, going from one place to another. We were like all zombies going around. So finally, on the third day of being in the train station, we found a seat on top of the train, my two sisters and several other ladies. It took us 4 weeks to get home. We went through Hungary, we went through Slovakia, we came home, and we went to our house. Our house it was not usable. The Germans had their soldiers in it, the horses, and they had horses in our house. But we could stay in somebody else's house. But we did hide some jewelry before we left the house. My father said to my two sisters and I, come with me, I have a little box of jewelry, I want to hide it, so when we come home we should have it. But my two sisters didn't want to bother with it, so I was the only one that knew where it was. She hid it, my father and I hid it in a corner, and I said to my sister, let's go see if the jewelry is there. And good enough, we went there and we found the jewelry. It was a chain from a watch, which I usually wear every day, but today a pocket watch. Today I decided to wear this, otherwise I wear that chain every day. So anyway, here we are back in my hometown, and my hometown is called Seredne. Today it's in the Ukraine. It used to be Czechoslovakia before the Second World War. The Second World War, 1930, the Hungarians marched in and took over, and then in 1944 of December, Russia liberated that part of the world. If only we had 6 more months. So now it's Ukraine and Russia. Anyway, so we, as I said, we found a few pieces of jewelry like wedding bands, a chain, earrings, so the house was not usable. We couldn't use it. So we went and stayed in somebody else's house. Some other survivors were coming home, a few here and there, trickle by trickle. And we went to our neighbors. We wanted to have our furniture back, our belongings. And you know what they told us? They said, if you want to live, you better leave. That's our neighbors, our best, good neighbors, okay? So of course we had no choice. Most of us left. Nobody stayed behind. So my sister Helen leaves the week after we got to Seredne because she met a young man on the train, and the young man was a Jewish son of a rabbi. They fell in love on the train station. After waiting for a train for 2 days, he said, here is my key to my apartment in Prague, Helen. When you go to Prague, when I'm done with the service, I'll come home and we get married. So Helen went to Prague. I stayed with my sister Judy in Seredne, and we wanted to have a little fun. And we want to see who's coming back, which of our friends is coming back from the war. Little by little, a few people, I don't think more than 24 people came home from the whole Jewish community that I know of. So, and then finally, after being there 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I said, well, it's time to leave because the Russians are closing the borders. They don't want people to leave. So we went to the train station, my sister Judy and I, to get a permit. We could not get a permit. After 2 days, my sister said, I am staying here. I'm going to get married because there's a young man in my hometown, a boyfriend who wants to get married and stay. She says, I don't want to run around and be hungry again. So she stayed. I never saw my sister again after that, my sister Judy, and I went to Prague. See, the same day when she went back home from Uzhhorod, that's where the train station was, I got the permit next day to leave. And I left, and we never saw her again. I went to Prague, and I stayed with my sister about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then she found out that they're looking for 1,000 orphans to be taken to England to rehabilitate. Holocaust survivor children. So
Under 16.
all had to be under the age of 16, and so my sister signed me up, and I went to Scotland with a group in February of 1946. And Sir Montefiore is the one who sponsored this group. He was a wealthy Jewish philanthropist in England. He sponsored us all. So, we were in hostels, all in different hostels. England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, scattered all over. 30 here, 50 there. And we stayed there, and then after a while the hostel was getting empty because the kids were leaving. They all had relatives here, there. Little by little, some of them went to Israel. Couple of my best friends went to Israel before Israel became a state. One of them went there. He was there a few days, and he got killed. He was a madrich, which is a leader in our group in Scotland. We were close to Edinburgh, like an hour away from Edinburgh by train.
Our contingent, we were so-called specialists of 300 concentration camp victims. We were pushed around from camp to camp to camp. And of course our camps were the same camps with wires, electric wires, and the minimum of food and the prisoner uniforms. And we were, as the Russians were coming closer in Mielec on that Polish side, they tried to move that aircraft factory, or parts of the aircraft factory, to Wieliczka, into the salt mines, into underground chambers, and start working again on aircraft equipment and produce. And we were part of the group to push that equipment in there, down the elevators, down the chambers, into the chambers, and start working on it. What they didn't figure out, after 4 or 6 weeks in the salt mines, everything got rusty and everything went kaput. You couldn't do anything. So we were moved again from there to Plaszów. And in all those other camps, my mother was still with us, but in the women's side. We did not really see each other. We could not get together, but we had, through rumors, somehow it was passed on that they're still okay and they're all right. And then we were pushed into Plaszów. In Plaszów, my mother and sister were separated and they went to Stutthof. And Stutthof is a pretty nasty camp, and that Stutthof is somewhere near the ocean somewhere, and I know for a fact, and it's been documented, that they took the inmates out on ships and barges and scuttled the ships and barges with the people on them. And that was, I'm sure my mother and sister were part of it. So we were part of the group that disassembled Plaszów camp, totally eliminated. All the barracks were taken apart, put on trains, and then it was up to us to get pushed forward. And they put us on kettle trains, and these kettle trains with a tiny little window with one bucket in the middle for refuse were shuttling back and forth this way and that way. And these people that from the area said, if we're going to the left, we're going to Auschwitz, which is probably 20 kilometers, nothing much more, 25 kilometers. If we're going to the right, we're going to go somewhere else. And this was going on back and forth, and finally the train took off and we went on. We wound up in Dresden, Germany. It took days and days and days. I have no idea what it took, okay? We made it through. We wound up in Dresden. We were put into a factory again. This time it was just barbed wire, no more electric wires. And we worked on tank equipment. Again, in this camp, we worked with Germans, the older Germans, on machinery, and we were intermingled with German prisoners. We were intermingled with murderers, politicians, and gay people. And each one had his insignia on their uniforms. They had triangles. The triangle going down meant something, the triangle going up meant something else, the triangle was in different colors meant something else. So like I say, homosexuals, murderers, political prisoners. And Dresden was bombarded in a firebombing in one night in February 1944. We were in it. We were up, our accommodations were on top of the factory, a 4-story or 5-story building, and we could see the city was on fire. We were evacuated down to the bomb shelters. There was a stampede on the staircase. Several people got killed. My brother fell into that mess. We had to pull him out. He just lost 2 toenails. We were able to pull him out. The air raid took place in 2 waves. They came, lit up the sky, bombarded. 2 hours later, they came again, lit up the sky like daylight, and firebombed. They used phosphorus bombs, and the entire city was leveled and burned to crisp. We got out of the bomb shelter in the morning, and we're out in the open. So we're out in the open. We could have escaped, but there was no place to go. We're in uniforms. We're shaved. We don't have clothes. The whole city's moving. People are walking around like zombies. They lost their houses. They're pushing carriages with their goods. They rounded us up and took us on a forced march to Theresienstadt. So you guys look at the map. We walked from Dresden to Theresienstadt, and it was February, and the further you go on, the colder it gets. There was snow up in the mountains, closer to Czechoslovakia. And there was about 350 that started off on the march. And people fall away by the wayside and left to die in the ravines by the street. We walked through the streets of the little towns, and the population doesn't throw any food at us. They don't. Nothing, they just look and ignore us. I have no idea what we ate during that march. Towards the end of the march, my father became very, very weak, very weak, let's put it, and we had to support him on the arms. Me and my brother and some other people would help him. And he made the march. We made it through to Theresienstadt. When we came to the Theresienstadt, they pulled him into a lazaret, which is semi-hospital. And there was no more room in the larger Theresienstadt. They pushed us into what they call this little fortress. It's still part of Theresienstadt with underground chambers, prehistoric type military base. And we were 50 to 60 in one of these little chambers. But out of the whole march, I don't think that 100 people survived from the 300. And this was now March, somewhere in the later March of 45. And we stayed there and trying to get ourselves out of the mud, and we built the little things on the floor and things that looked like beds. And we finally liberated May 8th, also by the Russians. And within a day, the Americans were there. And the gates were opened, and we were allowed to run out, and I didn't want to run out. My brother went out there and went through the villages nearby. They did a little bit of scavenging, and they came back, and he brought a can of sardines. And we ate that can of sardines, and the next day we were both down with typhoid fever. Now, while this was going on, just before this was going on, we would be able to walk to that building where my dad was and get to the windows and at least shout and call and wave. But when we were done with typhoid fever, which took 4 to 6 weeks, he was gone. So he passed away. And I hope he made it to the day of liberation. Okay, and while we were being taken care of with that typhoid fever, they quarantined half of Theresienstadt for that quarantine, for that typhoid fever. And also, when we were sort of semi-recovered, we heard that they're looking for underage orphans, they called us, okay, and able to go to England. We didn't want to go home. There was no place to go home. And we signed up. We made my brother 16, 15. Yeah, they made him 16, they made me 15, so we were eligible. There was no paper, there was no nothing to prove anything, and we were taken into Prague. We had a few weeks in Prague. We had the run of the city. We were very visible, very recognizable. We could go into any bakery and get food. We could go to any movie, couldn't understand what they were playing, but we would be sitting there on the first row. And we were waiting the time to get to England. And I was one of the first transports to make it to England. We were taken in bombers. We were sitting on the floor around the edge of the plane. There were bombers with the bomb bays, doors. You could see them. They could see the gaps between the bomb bays. You could see the ground. They had to stop for refueling. We refueled in Wales, and the let's say they well. They were celebrating us to come to England with tables of food, and there was only white bread, but we thought it was all white. It was cake. I haven't seen white bread in my life. In Europe, the bread is brown and dark, but anyway, we made it to England. Sir Montefiore was a benefactor. They divided us into hostels, 30 here, 35 here, 35 here. Before they actually divided us, our group, because we were sickies, we were the first ones out. I did have TV. And they put us into Windermere, which is another resort area in England, the Windermere Lakes. And we were in military bases, quarantined for 6 weeks to make sure nothing comes out of us. And then we were distributed into the hostels. And hostel after hostel, we came to Bedford, and then her hostel got eliminated, and Rose came to Bedford. 5 girls came to a hostel with 40 boys, and we called them the Don't Touch Me's because they were separating themselves. You couldn't get to them. And they were Hungarians, all 5 of them.
We were protecting ourselves.
They were protecting
all
themselves.
Those boys.
and
in those days, you did that.
Life was good. That hostel had a little bit of agriculture, gardens, and other things, and they had a metal shop.
Art school we
Art
had
school,
over there,
preparing us for future life, Israel and everywhere else.
Well, here we come to Bedford with all those good-looking kids, you know. Young boys. We had a good choice, a lot of choices. Anyway, the first day when I came in, I saw him and I said, he's for me. Okay? Okay, anyway, but it took me a while before I got him. We stayed there several months, and then we started to speak English. We went out on little jobs. We became independent. Okay.
But they spoke Hungarian.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. You spoke German and I spoke Hungarian. So actually what happened, we were forced to speak English because he couldn't speak my language and I couldn't speak his language. So even though I spoke Yiddish, Hungarian, Czech, Russian, you know, all those languages. But anyway, we stayed in Bedford, and they were
and we started working in Bedford.
Yeah, we worked
as independently, and live in the group, you know, where we lived in the hostels, but we would go out to work. And I had a job, and Rose had a job.
Bicycles.
And bicycles.
We had bicycles.
And as we became more and more independent, we moved on to London.
They dissolved the hostel because people were leaving every day. We moved to London. I lived in a Jewish family where the Montefiore's organization paid to this Jewish family to take care of me, okay? So I stayed with that family probably a year or more, maybe a year and a half, and then I got an apartment with a girlfriend, and then Max and I were dating, of course. We were engaged, and we got married in London in 1950. We were the first I think we were the
one of the
first
first marriages, yes.
couple to get married.
And we were married in West London Synagogue,
West-
which is near Marble Arch, a very famous.
West London Synagogue. It's a Reformed temple. Yeah, okay. And I had no parents, and he had no parents, so somebody needed to walk me down. Sir Montefiore walked me down the aisle, and a top hat, striped pants, and it was beautiful. And we were married, and we stayed in London for another year, and then we
stayed a total of 5 years.
Yeah, we stayed in London 5 years, and then Max's family offered to send us papers to come to the United States. It'll be 62 years in July. We have four children, and we have 9 grandchildren.
So
And the majority of them, our kids are in town, but the grandkids are all in different cities and colleges, and we are very proud of our family. We've done a great job on our kids and grandkids. We're really very happy. And we are really thankful to the United States for giving us this opportunity, okay? Because here, you can do anything you want.
But we didn't find gold on the streets. We had to make it on our own.
We made a wonderful life for ourselves. We were in New York for 5 years, then we came to San Diego, and boom, 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 I had 3 kids in 3 years.
Well, I was in Theresienstadt, and you know the poem, a butterfly doesn't fly anymore,
Doesn't
live here anymore, was actually written in
By some orphans.
In Theresienstadt by the children. Because when Theresienstadt started, they started mostly with people that were considered mischlings, mixed marriages, half Jewish, half not Jewish. And then it became a total ghetto, okay? And all kinds of people were pushed in there and then taken out of there into work assignments, into working camps.
Families were together. Okay.
To start with. But that did not happen to us because we, as the 3 of us, came into Theresienstadt in 1945, just 3 months before the war, before the end of the war. I think it is a very good project. I think it for me, when I come in here, it brings back many, many memories, especially since this theme started in Theresienstadt, and it recalls what I went through and how I survived. And I need to throw something out. When the Russians were coming close to Theresienstadt was surrounded by a moat, like a little river, and their intent was to gas or put poisons in that moat all around Theresienstadt and kill all the inmates just before the end of the war. But they never succeeded because the Russians somehow came in faster, and it never happened. And the project over here, in this particular school, we had 2 grandkids participating for our granddaughter was here a couple of years.
Ariana Schindler went to school here.
Alex was here for here about 3 years.
I just want to make one comment. Cheryl, you're doing a wonderful job. You're giving so much of your time. I think it's great, and I think it'll be very successful. And the kids are learning so much from these butterflies. It gives them an opportunity for us to come and be with them and paint these little butterflies. It's something.
Part of history.
Part of history, right? So continue doing the work you're doing, and I'm sure, and have a great trip in Poland. Okay, and thank you very much for doing this. And you're doing it really.
With Rebecca.
Right, Rebecca and whoever else is involved, right? Whoever else is involved, Rebecca and I don't know how many other girls. I think it's wonderful that you're giving so much of yourselves to this. Okay.
We do it from here.
Yes, and we are very happy to come here and be with the kids. I was here 2 years ago, and one of the girls came up. She reminded me, yes, don't you remember me? And I said, yes, I have a picture of you and me in the refrigerator from 2 years ago, one of the girls. So anyway, thank you very much, and keep doing what you're doing.